what was good for me was no longer the priority. It was about what was good for them. I never stopped along the way in life to process or to grieve all of the things that happened to me. One of those moments where you just release and it feels like a dam just broke in your heart. That became a coping mechanism for me throughout the years. What you don't deal with will inadvertently deal with you. Father God, I thank you. I worship you. I honor you. I praise you. This is about to be amazing. Be glorified through this. Amen. Welcome back, becomers. It's me, your sister, your friend, auntie, your transformational coach, Coach Nick. So today I wanted to share with you all this revelation that I had about myself. I realized that I never completely processed or even grieved over certain things and events that have happened in my life. I was living on go. I was living in survival mode. I was living for the next thing that was happening, right? Bills still had to be paid. I still had to go to work. I still had to go to school. I still had to be a mother. So it was always about survival. And I realized that it was never about healing. It was never about allowing myself to completely process or grieve over some things that are transpired. I had to put food on the table. I had to make sure that the lights were on. I had to make sure that my children had what they needed. So it was never about taking the time to just stop and heal. It was about providing and making sure that the next thing was there for the next thing. I became a mother at the age of 16. So I was pregnant at 16. And a week to the day, my son was born on the 7th of May, and my birthday was on May the 14th. So exactly a week to the day, I turned 17 years old. So I'm 16, I become a mother. My life at that moment, from May the 7th of 1993, my life's goal and focus became providing for my son, making sure that he had diapers, making sure that I could provide milk, just making sure that those basic needs were met. That was the most important thing. He was the most important thing to me. That was my number one goal and mission. And then about 5 years later, when I had my second son, it was about providing for them. And what was good for me was no longer the priority. It was about what was good for them. One of the biggest revelations I had the other day, when I realized I'm 48 years old now, I was 16 when I became a mother, that I never stopped along the way throughout my journey of parenting, throughout living. So from then until really now, I never stopped along the way in life to process or to grieve all of the things that happened to me before their birth, because so many things began to happen after their birth. So it was just like this continuous life. Life was happening continuously, but I wasn't completely living it. I wasn't completely experiencing it, because as these things were happening, I would suppress and push down whatever that thing was, and I would go about my life. Traumas were happening, stresses were happening, life was lifing. I believe that I was in a constant provide survival mode 24/7. Yes, there were times that I cried, and there were times that I dealt with my feelings and I dealt with my emotions. But the reality of it is, I never stopped to actually properly grieve or even to completely process. You know, it's funny. There are moments that come even now where something may trigger an emotion uh, connected to a memory or connected to a trauma. But the other day, one of those moments happened, something took place, and it triggered a cry from me that I don't know if I had ever really cried like that before. It triggered such a deep sob. It was a sorrow, and I mean, it was a hard, hard cry. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever had just one of those deep, hard cries? One of those moments where you just release and it feels like a dam just broke in your heart, a dam broke in your spirit, and everything just comes flowing out and pouring out of you. And it feels like it's from the very depth of your soul. And by the time you're done with it, it feels like I needed that and didn't realize I needed that. Well, this is what happens to me the other day. And I began to pray, which is a normal practice for me. I was praying over the cause of why I was crying. I started wiping my face really fast so I could continue doing the work that I was in the process of doing. And I clearly heard God say, "You always do that. You never stop to truly process and grieve. You drop a few tears, you give me how you're feeling, and then you keep going." What he began to minister to me was that became a coping mechanism for me throughout the years. And I had to sit with that for a second. That was the way I began to cope. When something happens, I cry about it. I start to pray about it. I give it to him, put it on the altar, and then I go on about my life because I got to keep going, right? I have to keep mommying, right? I have to keep working, right? I have to keep going. I wouldn't cry in front of my sons. I had this thing where I never wanted them to see me break. I never wanted them to have to deal with the things that I was carrying. I wanted to protect their innocence. I wanted to allow them to stay children. So, knowing my sons, if they saw me cry, they would say, "Well, Mama, what's wrong? Mama, what is it? Mama, are you okay?" And I remember when I was 17 years old, living on my own. I've been on my own since I was 17, and life was really, really hard. And if you can imagine being 17, having your own apartment and a baby, and I want you to think like 30, 31 years ago, being a 17-year-old. Today, I'm not saying parenting is any easier, but you have access to a lot more things, a lot more outlets, a lot more help. It's even acceptable and trendy to go get help and go talk to a counselor. So I want you to put your mind back 30, 31 years ago. I am in my own apartment. I'm raising my son. It felt like life was crashing down on me. So many things had happened. So many things had transpired in just that short amount of time that I was on my own. I wasn't even a good year in. Not a lot of people know it, but I miscarried. And one day I will share the story and behind that. But there was a lot of trauma that came along with even that pregnancy. But I felt like my son would have been better off with another mother, that there was somebody else that could give him a better life than I was able to give him because I was so incredibly broken. Now, I've mentioned to you all before that I am a survivor of sexual assault as a child. I'm carrying that and the weight of so many, many things in these 17 years of life. And then I have this traumatic event that happens. I get pregnant, I miscarry, and it just felt like Everything was coming down on me. So my solution, I thought at that time, would be to no longer be here on this earth, and that my son would be so much better with a different mother other than me. So I'm sitting in a chair one day and I am seriously contemplating, trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. My son at the time was crawling. So he's crawling into the room. He gets down to my ankle and he's kind of pulling up on me, trying to get my attention. He starts trying to crawl up my leg. I pick him up and I put him in my lap. Takes his little hand and he begins to wipe the tears off my face. I knew in that moment that that was God saying, I couldn't do that. That was God saying, you can't leave him. I looked down at him and he's just looking up at me with this look like, Mommy, it's going to be okay. He puts his head on my chest. Now I'm holding him so tight and I'm crying on him and I'm thinking, I can't do this to him. I didn't know how I was going to make it. I didn't know how I would survive, but I knew I had to get past whatever that moment was. As I'm holding him, I'm saying, a child should never have to come and wipe his mother's tears. He should never have to see me in that type of agony. And I believe that was one of the moments that I made the decision that whatever I deal with going forward, it would never be something that my children had to shoulder. It was not their burden. So I believe instinctively as a mother, I just said, I'm going to figure out now. I got to straighten myself up. I got to get me together because now he doesn't need to see this anymore. And I think that became part of my makeup. That became part of the armor that I wore as a parent. I believe that became survival and go mode. Just keep going. Just keep going. Everything else we put on the back burner. Just keep going. Your son never needs to see you like this again. Just keep going. Put those emotions and those feelings and whatever you're going through, stick all that on the back burner. In retrospect, I know that that was not the healthiest choice for me. But in that moment, it felt like the best choice. I said, you can always deal with it when you're by yourself. You can always find time to deal with it later. I don't care if you are a single parent or in a two-parent household. Y'all know that time by yourself and to yourself is rare. It is the unicorn. It is the Loch Ness monster to have moments that are truly yours. By the time I would get some, when they were asleep at night, I was exhausted from the day. So I just never dealt. I never took the time that I needed to heal, to grieve. The other day, when the Lord is having this conversation with me, I also realized that that was not the beginning of me actually doing that. Because when I was little and I was sexually assaulted, I was under the age of 5, and this is something that happened every day at the babysitter's home. And I was taught to never say anything. I was taught that I couldn't vocalize. So I learned then to suppress and to keep things to myself. So by the time I had reached the age of 17 and I now had a life that I was responsible for, my philosophy became, you shed your tear, you give it to God, and you keep on moving. How many of you listening right now can actually say that this has been you, that this has been you. Somewhere you learned or somewhere you taught yourself that I just have to keep going. Life has to continue. I just got to make it through this day. I love The Walking Dead. And in one season, this character was introduced by the name of Enid. She was a young girl, and her parents end up being killed by walkers. Her mother tells her right before she ends up dying to just survive somehow. So Enid's character spends like those first few months dealing with life by herself. She'd always write JSS, just survive somehow. She'd write it in the dirt, just reminding herself no matter what to keep going, just survive somehow. Sometimes surviving meant you don't grieve. Sometimes surviving meant you push down your pain. You suppress whatever it is you're feeling because you've got to survive and make it to the next minute. How many of you have felt like Enid? I just got to survive. I just have to make it. I don't have time to deal with these feelings and these emotions, because if I fully deal with what's going on, will I be able to keep going? If I fully deal with what's going on, I have to deal with the pain, with the hurt. If I fully deal with what's going on, if I allow myself to feel and to grieve, will I survive? I absolutely know now that I would survive. I would and will make it if I allow myself just to feel. I realize that I can grieve and keep going, that it is possible to grieve while I'm living, that it's possible to go through whatever necessary steps that I need to go through, and I can still survive. It's actually healthier for us to grieve than it is to suppress it and push it down. We can go on in a healthy way, and we can even go forward, but go forward healed. How many of you right now are saying, Nikki, that is actually my story? I just kept moving. I just kept paying bills. I just kept working. It became about the kids. It became about my husband. It became about my wife or caring for my parents. It became about surviving my environment. It was about getting my degree, but I never stopped and I never dealt. The definition of grief is a deep and intense sorrow or sadness that occurs after a loss, such as a death of a loved one. It is a natural emotional response and can affect a person's thoughts, behaviors, and physical health. If you were to look them up, there are several definitions for the word grief. But there is something about this particular one right here that really connected to where I am in my journey right now, because I never felt that deep and intense sorrow. I never dealt with there actually being some losses. There was one season in my life, and my oldest son and I just talked about this the other day. Well, we were losing family members, and it felt like it was back to back to back. I'm going to be honest with you. I remember saying to myself, well, this happens when you have a large family. That was my way of coping, not dealing, but coping with the grief. And the thing is when you're still healing, or you're still crying, or you're trying to grieve over one loss by death, and then another one happens, and then another one happens, whether it's 2 years or 6 months later, I remember the losses were in such close proximity to each other. My son said, Mom, I don't want to go to any more funerals. I think he just got numb to it at that point, especially being young and dealing with your feelings and death and all those emotions that they bring. What's important to say in this moment, if you're in the process of grieving the loss of a loved one, no one can determine how long that process will be for you. My prayer is that you just allow yourself to go through the process. And that is something that I don't think I completely did, especially in those times when I saw how it affected my children. It became about making sure he was good and how he was processing it. It became about helping my other family members process. It became about, we've got to plan the funeral now. We got to make sure this is right. We got to make sure the program is right. And I have to sing at the funeral, which I hate. I hate singing at funerals. But at one point in time, I was being called to sing at them. It was about making sure that the colors were going to be right, and the process of processing and processing a thing to make sure that the funeral went off without a hitch. But never just the process of processing the sadness and the grief or the overwhelm of the losses. Although it is a natural emotion to grieve something, to grieve someone, one thing that we do culturally and one thing that we do as a society that I wish we would stop doing is making statements to each other like, don't cry. Don't cry. You have to be strong for him. Don't cry. You got to be strong for your mother. You got to be strong for your child. You got to be strong for your sister or your auntie. We need to stop doing that. We need to stop stopping people from doing what is natural, from crying. I heard it said that crying is your soul releasing, but we will hinder our souls from releasing by telling people, don't cry. You got to be strong for so and so. But because we can handle our own emotions and our own processes, and we're not dealing with our own grief, we don't know how to cope with other people's grief. So we will tell them, don't cry, you're going to make me cry. Stop crying because you're going to make me cry. Stop crying. Don't so and so. Don't do that because you got to be strong for it. You never have to be strong for anybody. You never have to cut off what needs to heal in you, what you need to do to heal on behalf of anybody else. I hate that lie. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay if you don't have the words to tell me when I'm not okay. It's okay for me to say, God, I'm not okay. God, I'm not strong right now. God, this hurts. God, I miss them. God, my heart aches right now. It's okay to tell your friends, I'm not okay. I'm not strong in this moment, and I don't desire to be. I don't want to shoulder other people's grief at the cost of not dealing with my own. It's okay to say, I don't know what I'm feeling. I just know that I'm hurting right now. And then we have to be the type of friend, the type of loved one that can just be honest. I know you're hurting right now. I know you're grieving. I know right now you are in pain. I don't know what to do, but I'm here for you. I don't know what to say, but if you want to talk, I'll listen. I don't have anything to give, no word that can take away what you're feeling right now, no word that can diminish this pain or this loss, or that you lost your job, but my arms are here. Can I hug you? Can I hold you? The definition goes on to say that it's a natural emotional response that can affect the person's thoughts, behavior, and their physical health. What happens to you when you don't allow that natural process to happen? It's going to still affect your thoughts. It's going to still affect your behavior and your physical health. What you don't deal with will inadvertently deal with you. Because sometimes when people are trying to cope, instead of dealing with it, they're trying to cope with it. And they'll find things that help them cope, or mask it, or suppress it, or forget about it. So maybe they'll drink. That drinking becomes excessive. Maybe they'll smoke, whatever the choice of smoke is. And before they know it, they won't function throughout their day without having that. Because when they're high, they're not here. They're not here to deal with it. Maybe they'll eat, and before they know it, it's become excessive. And then there's weight that they've gained. Or there are other health issues that come along with what they've been eating and how much they've been eating. Maybe they'll have sex, because that euphoric feeling that they get when they're in the act of having sex takes them away, brings them here so they don't have to deal here. Some people will do things like hurt themselves. So it's vitally important to allow yourself to grieve, and to grieve in the proper way and in a healthy way. Is there a healthy, proper way to do it? There is no textbook way to do it. I wish that every 5 points to dealing with grief worked for everybody. Not every way that works for one person will work for another. But I will tell you, holding it all in and suppressing it and finding ways to cope with it or manage it in a way that you don't have to deal with it is definitely not healthy, and could be very detrimental to you, to your mental health, your physical, your spiritual, and your emotional health, and could hurt you in the long run. Because what may feel good right now could become an addictive or excessive behavior later that has other consequences to it. Another thing we have to be cautious of, these things can actually take over your thoughts and begin to dictate the decisions that you make. You may think because you're not head on dealing with it, that it's really not affecting you in your daily life. And in actuality, it is. You've been making some decisions based on those things that happen. So because this happened, now you've put these things in place. Because this happened, you now have that set up in your life. You have these absolutes and these promises that you've made to yourself, because you will never allow these things to happen to you again. So to keep them from happening, you set up all these different safeguards. A lot of the times those safeguards are actually prisons. They're prison walls that you have built around yourself and around your heart, because they're thick enough to protect your heart. They're thick enough to keep you from feeling. They're thick enough to keep the hurt out, but they're also thick enough to keep you in. They're also thick enough to keep the goodness out from coming in. They're thick enough to keep you from healing. So in this moment that I'm having with God, all of the things that I never grieved over just started coming out. I know some of you, since you started watching this episode, there are a lot of things that are starting to come up for you. Some of you have started writing them down. Some of you are just sitting there and you're thinking, wow, this is for me, because this is exactly what I'm going through right now. And for some of you, It's the beginning of a beautiful process of healing. I want to share some things to help you on this journey that are truly helping me. Number one, please never forget that grief can be a wide range of losses, pain, or changes. And some of them are things that you may not have even thought of that you should be grieving over. They just are things that happen in this life, and life happens. We did mention the death of a loved one, but we didn't talk about the death of a marriage, the death of a relationship. Some of us have not grieved the divorces. The ending of a marriage is like the death of something. For me, it was experiencing a death in so many ways. It was the death of the potential of what could have been. It was the death of dreams and desires, the dreams that we had together, the plans that we made together, even the things that were accomplished together up until that time. It was the ending of chapters. It was the ending of lives that were intertwined together. This was the person that I woke up with in the morning and I went to bed with at night. This was the person that I communicated with throughout the day. This was the person that I made and create memories with. This was the ending of what was normal, the normalcy in our lives. It was the ending of trust. It was the breaking of trust. When you build trust in someone over time and that gets broken, that was a deep loss for me. It was the ending of a certain amount of comfort. When you rely and you lean on your partner, your spouse, they have responsibilities, you have responsibilities. Together you have responsibilities. But leaning on them for their share, for leaning on them for the support they provide you emotionally, financially, whatever it is, it was a loss. And I didn't mourn. I didn't mourn those things. And some of you were so happy that it was finally over because of the drama that ended once the divorce was over. You weren't happy. There were so many things that, and for some people, they were divorces that needed to have happened for your own safety. But you were so happy and so exhausted by the time it finally ended. It became about moving forward. It became about, now I have this new life and I have all these new things that I have to do. And I even have to go get my name changed. There's so many things that took precedent over you taking the time just to grieve all the other parts. I'm not saying that everyone has to grieve a divorce or a relationship, but even when they were ones that you needed to get out of, even when they were ones that in no way were they healthy, there were parts, some thoughts, some feelings, some emotions that you still needed to release, that you still needed to process, and that you still needed to deal with. And then you have the loss of a job, the change of a career. You have health issues, going from being healthy to having something happen where you can't do things the same way anymore, where there's a terminal diagnosis and that illness has changed your quality of life or your loved one's quality of life and completely changed your normalcy, the way that you do things. You got to change vehicles now. You have to get a different bed. You got to move where there's just one floor instead of two. There's this new normal that has happened in your life or that has happened to someone that you loved, and you haven't completely just dealt with the feelings and the emotions. There are support groups for caregivers, for spouses who take care of their spouse, for parents that have to care for adult children because of some form of illness. They have these support groups because those people are so busy and so invested in caring for their loved one that they don't have time to care for themselves. They don't have time to process their feelings. There's even a level of guilt if they feel exhausted, if they feel resentful, if they feel like I don't want to do this today, there's this level of guilt along with this burden. And they have amazing support groups to support caregivers. There's financial loss. There's a loss of a home, whether it was due to eviction or foreclosure, a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado. There is that loss that many people don't think about. Then there's grieving miscarriages. There's grieving infertility. I understand what that's like because I've miscarried before. I can't describe what that feels like. I don't know if I will ever have adequate words to describe that. But that is something that some people don't even have the luxury to grieve over because they are trying so hard to have a baby and they've experienced multiple miscarriages. Before they can grieve over the loss of one, they're already trying for another. What about grieving the loss of a dream? You had goals, you had a business, but it failed. You had a business and you had to file for bankruptcy. You wanted to go to school, but you couldn't. You wanted to get the degree, but you didn't. What about when you're empty nesting? Sometimes us empty nesters don't know how to cope with the new chapter in their lives once their children become adults and they move away from home. I know a few people actually, when their children left the nest, they began to shop and shop and shop. They were finding things to do with their time and with their emotion because they felt so discombobulated. Your life is tied up in your children, and then one day they become adults and they don't need you in the same way. Have you dealt with that? Then you have the things that are taking place in our world, in our neighborhoods, in our micro worlds that we hear so much about. I think we become numb. I think we become apathetic to it at some point. I remember one day I was in the kitchen cooking. Whatever I was watching had just gone off and the news came on immediately after. Well, y'all know the news will spend the first 10, 15 minutes giving you all of the sad stuff, the sad news in the world, the murders, the robberies, the crimes, all of those things. There were like 3 stories back to back. As I'm cooking, not one time did I stop and say, what? I cannot believe that happened. As it went on to the commercial break, the news anchors began to kind of joke about the next segment that was going to come on after. I stopped in that moment and I said, they just got through reporting some pretty horrible stuff. And now they're joking as they go into the next story. And I said, wow, they are just so apathetic. Like, are they just numb at this point in their career? I do this every day. I hear this every day. This is just the news. Are they that numb to it? Then I started thinking, but the real question is, Nick, you heard them reporting this stuff, but you continue to stir your beans with all the things that we hear about in our society, our neighborhood, let alone just in our families, in our little micro worlds. Have we become so numb and apathetic to what's happening because it's happening at such a constant rate and it's happening continuously and we're always hearing about it? We're taking in all this information, but we're not processing it. We're taking it all in, but we're not taking a moment to deal with it, to grieve from it, to deal with the feelings that we're feeling. Are we just stirring our beans? I'm not saying every situation requires you to sit for days in grief, whatever grief looks like to you, that you have to mope over it for a year or two. Nor am I saying that you should be over it in 2 seconds either. The process is going to look different for everyone. I know for me, having something happen and get it to bounce off of me so I can keep going, or having something happen and learning the art of suppression so I can keep on moving on. I don't want to be that efficient in this anymore. I don't want to be this good at it. I don't. I don't want to. My body should not be carrying that amount of stress and trauma. Think I'm lying. Do you want to test and see how much you're carrying? Go get a massage. Go get a massage. Let someone massage you. Get your partner or your friend just to do your shoulders and your neck. Look at how good it feels, but how much it hurts. Your body carries these things, these stresses. Our bodies carry them. They literally do. They really do. Sometimes it carries in the form of headaches, pulsation in your head and behind your eyes. You'll find yourself getting little colds. You ain't been around nobody sick, but now all of a sudden you got a scratchy throat. Like your body has a way of dealing. If you don't deal, it'll deal with you. Some of us just need to learn to deal with what just happened, like in that moment, instead of dealing with how you feel. Right now, you're angry about what just happened. So you're dealing in that anger. Can we deal with how we feel? Why did it make me that angry? Why did it make me upset? What was it about that I got that upset? Examine those feelings. Just as we got into the habit of suppression, how about we process? You can suppress real quick, process real quick. Or not, however long you need to. But there are moments that I don't need to just be ticked off about something and tell you how I feel and give you a good piece of my mind. I need to deal with, why am I that angry about it? Why am I that ticked off? Why is it that I get this angry when this happens? Why do I get so disappointed when this happens? Why is the go-to default reaction this or thought that? And deal with it. If you are that person and you have had someone tell you, man, you go from 0 to 100, man, you get mad real quick, you pop off. That's you dealing with something here, but not dealing with it under the surface. Man, boy, you'll cut somebody off in a minute. You'll quit talking to people in a minute. That's you dealing here, but not dealing with what's underneath the surface. I just recommend and truly offer to you that you just take a moment to genuinely begin to deal with what's going on underneath the surface of you. Not the beautiful you that smiles, that can put on some makeup and a cute wig. Not that part that's wearing this mask. Not that part that loves to serve people and smiles all the time and you're always there for everyone. Not that. Not the you that is super strong. You are the king and you are the protector. You're the provider for your family. You take care of mom and them and everybody and them and all the kids. You're always there, but you don't have anybody to help you deal with what's going on beyond that. I want to highly recommend to all of you that you not only make the decision to start dealing with what's underneath, but that you sit and talk to someone. The things that started coming up for me, I realized were never things that I got into it with my therapist. As a matter of fact, there are some that we touched on, but I realized I'd only give her some layers of it, not all. But there are a lot of things that we never did. And so now I have new things that I've decided that I'm going to open up about. I'm going to talk about some things that I've never told anybody, some things that only God knows. There are some things that I wrote about in my book, but I am still figuring out the best way to deal with how they made me feel, to deal with the way it shows up. Because sometimes pain begins to show up and it doesn't always need a trigger. It didn't always need that invitation. Sometimes when you just get still enough, pain will say, okay, great, here's my opportunity to be dealt with and processed. And now I'm in a place where I am ready to sit down with it, to deal with it and to process. And there is someone right now saying, and that's it, Nikki. I don't want to deal with that type of pain. I don't want to deal with that. It hurts too much. It's too much to deal with. It's too overwhelming. If I don't think about it, I don't have to feel it. If I don't think about it, I don't have to realize they're truly gone. Why do I even have to worry about it? It was 5 years ago. It was when I was 10. We're not even together anymore. It may be why you're afraid to be by yourself, why you jump from relationship to relationship, because it's better to be with somebody than to be by yourself. Because when you're by yourself, it's quiet. And when it's quiet, you have to deal. You're not allowing yourself to actually heal in the transitional period between events, between traumas, between relationships. You're just jumping from thing to thing. About 8 or 9 months after my former fiance passed away, my mama asked me, she was like, "How are you doing?" I was like, "I'm doing good. I'm good." And it was the way that she asked that made me say, "Why do you ask that?" She said, "Because it seems like you're working and keeping busy so you don't have to deal with how you're feeling." I was highly offended. I was highly offended because truly and surely I was working because what I do was important, and I had to make sure that it was getting done because there were other people's lives that would be affected if I did or I did not show up. And I gave all these reasons as to why I was working so hard. That was God speaking to me through my mother. The busier I was, the less time I had to deal. The more things that were on my plate, the less time I had to feel. I was doing what I had become so accustomed to doing. I was in survival mode. But now I'm in a place where I'm ready. And some of you are there too. You realize listening to this that it needs to happen and you're ready. Some of you have been ready and didn't know how to begin. I want to share a few other things with you that have also been helping me. You have to now make it okay. Make it okay that now you are ready. I don't care how long ago it was. You have to be okay with allowing yourself the time and the space to do it. It has to be okay with you first. Be the first one to be okay with it and the only one to be okay with it. This is not where everybody gets a vote. I'm going to say it. This is not where everybody gets a vote. Everyone does not get to vote if it's okay for you to start getting your healing. This is not the space where someone can come and tell you, "Don't cry. Why are you bringing that stuff back up? Why are you going there? That happened so and so such ago." It has to be okay with you first and okay with you only. Hear me when I say, come into agreement with yourself, with your heart, your mind, body, and your spirit that it's okay that now we are going to deal with what happened. Not only are we going to deal with them, but we are going to survive. This is not going to take us out, and we are going to be okay. Next, create a safe space. Do not allow any judgment to come into that space of healing. You cannot judge yourself on how you need to heal. You can't say things, for instance, "Why am I even crying over that? That happened way back when I was 10. That happened back when we were married. I'm a grown woman. Why am I even acting like this over this?" Those are statements of judgment and condemnation. And you cannot allow them in your space of healing. Why was I so stupid to let that happen to me? If you allow those type of thoughts into your healing space, not only is it no longer safe, you've created a space of condemnation. Now, there is a difference between taking responsibility for what you did, for the role that you played, for what you allowed in your life. There's a difference between that and you condemning yourself. Judgmental spaces that condemn will never allow for God's righteous and complete healing in your life. When I go to God about something that has happened to me, He will talk to me about the role that I played. He will talk to me about the decisions that I made, the things that I did. Yes, He will do that. That's called correction. That's called discipline. That's called helping me to heal and change so I don't keep making those same mistakes and living those same patterns. But not one time has He ever made me feel condemned. Has He ever made me feel like crap? Has He ever talked to me the way I talk to myself? If God is not going to condemn me and talk harshly to me, I don't have the right to do it to myself, and neither do you. In these spaces that you're going to create, it is vitally important that you are intentional about what you say to yourself, what you think about yourself, and how you speak to yourself about the things that you are overcoming. Also, consider creating a physical safe space for you. Some people live to make spaces within their closets. They have a pillow and a book to journal in, or books to read that really build their spirit and heal them. Some do it at their dining room table, some in their bedroom. Make sure it's a space that's quiet, that is free from distractions. Turn your television off, turn your phone and your notifications off. Create this space that is conducive to your healing. The next thing I would say is to seek professional help. This is not something that I would encourage you to do by yourself. I would not encourage you to take this journey of healing by yourself. Seek professional help, counseling, the therapist, your pastor, talk to your doctor, depending on what it is that you're having to deal with. Speak to your doctor, let them know what's going on. You should talk to trusted friends. You should talk to trusted family members. There are amazing support groups that you can reach out to where there are people who have shared experiences. There are various support groups out there. And if you just can't find one for you, maybe you can start the support group. I also want to highly recommend that you do not do this process without God. You need Him. You need Him to lead and guide you through this. What I love about God is He not only knows exactly what you need, but He knows how you need it. Because the way you may need to heal may be different from me. We may have experienced the exact same thing, but our healing processes may be different. I love how He will send the laborers into your life, the people that have exactly what you need to get you to the next part of the process, the right organization, the right support group, counselor, the right therapist. He knows exactly what you need to help you. If you allow Him into your process, invite Him into your healing space, ask Him to lead you and guide you and walk you through it. It is amazing what God will do in your life. Something else that is helping, engaging in practices that allow for healthy reflection. That could be prayer, journaling, meditating. When it comes to journaling, writing down your thoughts and your feelings, your emotions is so therapeutic. It can also be so important to your healing process. Sometimes there are things that you just can't say with words, but you can write them out. You can detail what you're feeling out on paper. I don't know what it is about pen in hand. Pen in hand is just like the freedom and the safe space, the safety net to express how you're feeling without backlash, without pushback, without resistance. Because something about that pen in hand don't care what you're trying to block. It wants to get it all out. So I encourage you to try journaling. Another beautiful thing about journaling is chronalizing. I think I'm saying the word wrong, but it's chronologizing the process of your healing. You get to see where you were. You get to see where you are. And later on, you get to look back and see the process that you went through, where you started and then where you are now. A creative outlet. Having a creative outlet is also important. So many of our favorite songs were written because it was somebody's outlet when they were going through pain. Maybe writing song, maybe singing if you are a singer. Maybe you're just a great writer. Writing out everything in your journal may be the first step to you creating your own book. Painting, sewing, maybe it's you volunteering your time somewhere. Maybe it's you baking for elderly people in the neighborhood or in your church. Maybe it's cooking meals for people that are unable to cook for themselves. There are so many therapeutic ways and practices that you can engage in that will help not only just in your healing process, but it's a great outlet. You are using that energy towards something that not just helps you, but helps others as well. Try walking. I heard the other day this woman said she was going through a lot of things and she just started walking. And she started realizing the more she walked, the more it allowed her to release things that she was feeling. And now she's walking miles and hours per day because walking has become therapeutic for her. So you have to find ways, outlets that will help you with the expressions of what you're feeling, healthy ones. There are also breathing techniques. I've been learning over the last few years. Breathing is so vitally important to releasing tension, but also putting you in a place where you're present in the moment. You've ever heard someone say, hey, just calm down and take a deep breath? That is a real thing. Sometimes we do just need to calm down and take a deep breath because it stops us from just feeling in that moment to dealing underneath with what we are feeling in that moment. Instead of me feeling the anger that I'm feeling or just feeling the sadness that I'm feeling, it makes me sit still, breathe in and out deeply, slowly, long enough to really just examine what I'm feeling underneath, to calm myself down, be more present, be more focused in that moment. And there are so many other scientific things that we can get into. I'm not the expert when it comes to breathing work, but there's a lot of information out there about it. And sometimes you just need to stop and take a deep breath. So now that you have all of these things that I've shared with you, the last thing I want to say to you, what's going to be super important is number one, begin to incorporate these things in your daily routine. Allow your healing to become a daily part of your life. If journaling is something you're going to take up, allow it to become part of your routine. Maybe your morning routine. Maybe get up 30 minutes early so you can have that time to journal. Maybe include it into your night routine where right before you go to bed, you spend 15, 20, 30 minutes writing out your feelings. Maybe it becomes what you do on your lunch break. Incorporate some of these things as part of your self-care. Praying and meditating and sitting and breathing and allowing yourself to feel is part of your self-care. While you are doing your makeup, while you're doing your skin routine, take the time to do affirmations. Speak life into yourself. Speak over yourself. Begin to declare the great things that you want to see. Begin to rebuke the things that you no longer want to see. Use that time to pray and ask the Lord to pour into you. You got to be patient with yourself. Some of these things that you've been suppressing for years, I wish I could tell you that in 15 minutes it'll be over. That's not going to be everybody's testimony. So be patient with yourself. Be patient with the process. Do not grow weary in your process. Also understand that this may be a continuous process. This process may take you a while. You are worth the healing though. You're worth the healing. It may not be a one-time journey. When the Bible tells us that we're to forgive someone, not just 7 times, but 7 times 70, it doesn't just mean that person may continue to do things that you have to keep on forgiving. Maybe that person did one thing, but every time it comes up in your mind, you have to make the choice to forgive them again. And that includes you. I may forgive myself in this moment and then think about something that I did. I got to forgive myself again. I can't keep beating myself up over something that I did that I said I forgive myself for, but then I keep bringing it up and I keep holding it against myself, or we keep holding things against others. Your journey to healing may be something that you have to continually do, continually repeat. You may not have to grieve over it forever, but your process to healing may be a continuous one. And it may not look the same this week as it's going to look next week. It's about making sure that you are good always, mentally, physically, and emotionally. What does that require you to do? Does it require you to do affirmations daily? Does it require you to stay prayed up in an area over a thing? What does it require you to do to be the best you and the healthiest you that you can be? Don't compare your journey to someone else's. Don't compare their term length to what yours should be. Make healing and growth something that you allow to be a long term. Whatever that term is, just so long as you see it through to its completion. Believe it or not, there can be some positive outcomes when it comes to grieving. Processing grief can lead to some stronger relationships in your life. It can lead to better mental health, better decisions being made, a renewed sense of self, a renewed desire to take care of yourself, a renewed sense of priority. It could lead to weight being lifted, the way you view the world. I'm going to tell you, since I've been allowing a lot of things to surface, I can actually see patterns that I've had in relationships where I was not valuing myself, so I was allowing myself to be devalued. It has begun already to significantly change how I interact with certain people in my life. It has renewed the way I value my time, the way I value my time management. It has shown me by not dealing with things in my life like I should have been, that it was allowing other things to take place in my life that I didn't even realize. But now it's like the curtain has been pulled back. It is like Windex has been sprayed on my eyeballs, and I can clearly see things. I can see patterns and systems and mindsets that were set up that are being torn down. I can see relationships that need to end. So much freedom has come. The haze is gone because I'm no longer looking through filtered lenses, and I'm loving what I am discovering. I want you to remember that you're not going through this alone. It doesn't matter who you are, what title you have, what you own, what hats you wear. God loves you at the core, and he wants to help you deal with things that you've been carrying. Dearly becoming, I want to thank you today for listening to me, for being an ear for me today, for allowing me to be real and to be vulnerable with you, to share with you where I am on my journey, to give you pieces of my heart and my process, in the hopes that it will encourage you and show you that you are not alone on this journey, that you don't have to be perfect. None of us are perfect. We are all trying to figure this thing called life out together. And with us building this community, we can do this together. We can support one another. I want to encourage you to create the safe space and make it okay for you to begin your healing. I want you to seek the support that you need. Allow someone else to shoulder this journey with you. Do not go at this alone. And I want you to remember to incorporate those reflective practices that we've discussed to help you stay present and help you manage this process and these emotions. Whatever you do, don't quit. You are worth it. Take this journey with compassion, without fear, and without condemnation. Never forget how much God truly, truly loves you, and that becoming is beautiful. I want to thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode. I really want to hear your thoughts. Please leave me a comment telling me at least one thing that really spoke to you today. If you've been encouraged, I would love to hear, because that would encourage me. You can also drop me an email at dearlybecomingpod@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe, hit the notification button, and take a moment to share. And please let me not end this episode without thanking each of you who have been praying for my mother. She was back in the hospital, but she is out and she is doing amazingly well. So praise God for that. And I thank the Lord so much for you all and your prayers. Until next time, bye.